Morning, everyone. My name is Josh McClung, and we're going to be having a really interesting conversation this morning about how we believe we need to change how America eats in this country. As I mentioned, Josh McClung, I run a strategy and investments team at Cox Enterprises, a family-owned and operated conglomerate in Atlanta, focusing on diversification into food and agriculture. We have Nicholas Green, who's the co-founder and CEO of Thrive Market, an e-commerce platform that is a subscription platform that connects individual consumers with natural and organic products. We have Matthew Higgins, who's co-founder and CEO of RSC Ventures, a venture firm that was co-founded with Stephen Ross, who has been an active investor in healthy, fast casual concepts such as Momofuku and Milk Bar. He's also vice chairman of the Miami Dolphins and has been a guest shark on the Shark Tank. Last but not least, we have Nicholas Stone, who's the founder and CEO of Bluestone Lane Coffee, one of the fastest growing premium coffee brands and cafes within the country that's focused on natural and healthy products within this ecosystem. So, we've been hearing a lot of publicity around what it is that we eat and what we don't eat here in the U.S. We see this with the emergence of activist shareholders, changing consumer preferences, and we've seen this materialize most recently with the Kraft Heinz $15 billion write-down, which speaks very directly to how it is consumers in America are valuing what they eat differently today. Chobani, over a 10-year period, has become the largest yogurt brand within the country. And so there's a real shift underway within our CPG and how we both produce and eat food here today. And so when I hear change, I typically go to the idea that there's an underlying problem that we're looking to solve and face. And so, Nick, I'd love to get your perspective on what do we think that problem is and how America eats today, and why is that important both at a macro level but also to you with Thrive Market?
Yeah, well, the problem goes back nearly 100 years to the birth of industrial agriculture. And so it's not just a problem today, but it's a problem that's been building over a long, long time. The problem, quite simply, is the food, and I use food kind of in air quotes because it's really food-like substances that now comprise the majority of the American diet, are horrible for our health, and very imminently becoming more and more horrible for the environment. And I think the macro trend that is driving the Kraft Heinz write-down and the basically turning upside down of the entire CPG but broader food ecosystem in general is that consumers are becoming conscious of this. The epidemic in health-related diseases that are lifestyle driven is now impossible to ignore. You go into most of the country and you see rates of obesity that are approaching 50%. Yep. You see hypertension, type 2 diabetes, all of these issues that 100 years ago didn't exist. 50 years ago were only happening in people in their 40s or 50s, and today are happening to people in their teens. It's just impossible to ignore. And on the environmental side, you have an awakening, I think, among consumers about where we're going with global warming and an increasing awareness that this isn't a problem, even for our children, it's a problem potentially for us. Yeah. And so, it's a complete turning of the world upside down in a very, very positive way, and change that needs to happen. And for our business, we want to basically facilitate that. We want to make it possible for any consumer, wherever they are in the United States, to shop healthy, organic, natural products that are ethically sourced, that are sustainably developed, and that are healthy for their bodies and for their family.
And so, Matthew, with your position in the marketplace, looking across a number of different companies, what are the trends or the key components that you look for as to determining whether or not this is a fad or that this is a broader systematic need for change, and how that's materializing in the companies that you're looking at the beginning stages of your process?
Well, I think going back to also, what's the problem? I think fundamentally, we're doomed if we don't do something about the environment. And I think there's an awakening. You can feel the tipping point is being reached where people are starting to understand that. I don't know if it's necessarily driving consumer behavior, and the taste changes at large, but you know there's going to be a convergence between that awakening of the fact that we're in the middle of the 6th extinction event and vertebrae are dying off at the fastest clip, ever. But I don't know if that's broadly aware, but it will converge. I think the bigger phenomenon in terms of what makes a fad is we're all living on Instagram and living our best life and trying to demonstrate what that means. And there's a lot of social ills that go with Twitter and everything else. And I don't need to enumerate them, but one of the benefits is the definition of living your best life means you work out constantly and you eat beautifully beautifully curated, colorful food. And so that you see the shift in terms of what it means to live well includes eating well. So that's number one. And two, in terms of what makes a fad or not, I think we're not at the point yet where vegan concepts exclusively are sustainable. The numbers, 1% of people were vegan in 2014, now it's 6%, so there's a surge. But still not quite there yet. So what we look for, is there a bridge for the quote-unquote, average person, the person who wants to live a better life and be healthier, but is not willing to fully commit to being, evangelical and vegan all the time. So to me, that's, and my team is really important, is someone playing in that space of being a bridge. Yeah. And a bridge, to me, has the following attributes. Does it taste really good, right? Because you don't want it to have to be a values-based decision. Is it scalable? And in order for people to adopt it, are you proselytizing to them, or are they adopting it because it's just better for their body? So that's a long, run-on way of saying, like, it has to meet the features of any other product, right?
That's exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And it shouldn't be compelling just because you're going to save planet Earth, although I think we need to save planet Earth.
Yeah, when you get folks trying to sell people on a values-based decision can be beneficial, but I think that ends up limiting you to a smaller segment of the market.
Yeah, it's a nice to have. Look, if everything was based on values-based decisions, everybody would vote in elections and we'd have full participation. Like, values-based decisions are good ultimately, but at the end of the day, they can't be the driver.
That's exactly right. Well, and Nicholas, I'd be curious to get your perspective on, with your business, it's very local, it's very personal and direct with people coming in and out of your locations. How is it that you've crafted your message around what Bluestone stands for, and how you see that resonate with people around this core underlying problem around health and wellness and the sustainability impact of going further back down into the production areas of agriculture?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia, and I used to leave my office twice a day to go to my local coffee shop. And in Melbourne, it's the land, or in Australia, it's the land of independence. It's actually where Starbucks failed. 13th biggest economy in the world, but Starbucks couldn't make it there. And I think it's because the people really spend a lot of time in curating their establishments, and that includes everything on the menu, particularly as it relates to premium coffee and tea, but really healthy, nutritious, real food. Then there's other elements regarding the aesthetics and certainly the service. But I think when I moved to the States in 2010, I'd never worked in hospitality whatsoever, but I couldn't believe how transactional the experience was. And I think that really sums up what's going on in the food movement here, that the acceleration of processed food has caused such incredible externality in society. And I think now that the Gen Z and millennials realize they're going to have to deal with all these problems, that they want to get in the front foot, and that's our core customer. So when we introduce a healthy product, they're very excited about it. And I think Matt summed it up perfectly. Like, we're not serving just carrots with a splash of hummus. We're actually, you can craft such incredible food with natural produce. We don't focus on process. We don't have a commissary even. So I do think that we're acting as a facilitator to introduce better eating and more conscious eating. And I think that there's a real chance with our demographic in trying to push it forward. And the more establishments, particularly as it relates to fast casual, that introduce that, hey, you can eat vegan and you didn't even realize it was vegan, it just tasted so good. I think that's going to be the big catalyst, and I'm excited about that acceleration of plant-based alternatives. And myself, I reckon 3 years ago when someone told me about the Impossible Burger, I was like, this is not legitimate. And then, we made one in our, one of our restaurants a couple of months ago, and we ate it and just couldn't believe how good it was. So I think it's actually here now, and we're excited to be behind it. And one of our biggest themes for this year is actually meat as a condiment. So everything vegetarian, and a lot of options and a lot of alternatives that are vegan, and then meat if it's as a condiment, where it's sort of an addition, not a standard, and primarily fish and and eggs, actually. Yeah.
I actually really like that shift in thinking, the evolution of, it's not that we're seeking a full, true replacement, but rather it's an evolution of how we think about the balance of what it is that we're consuming and the habits that we're developing. Because we've seen some stats around, if everyone went vegan, you'd cut down greenhouse gas emissions by like 50% within production agriculture. But the realistic nature of that is pretty nil. Which leads me to my next question on, so where does this ultimately end up? Because we spend time with a lot of the big ag incumbents, your Cargills, your ADMs, your Bayer Monsantos now, and they push back on saying, this is nice that there's this healthy, organic, natural product, but it really doesn't get us to the point where we think we can feed the world, or where we think that this is a broader mass appeal. And it's not just the urban centers or the coast, it's something that can thrive in Kansas and Missouri. And so Nick, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on this, because I know it's a core principle is that there's this democratization of healthy organic foods to try to address these fundamental issues that exist by not having that nutrition.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are just wrong about the level of demand in the Kansas and the Minnesota and the Missouris of the country. To give you a sense, when we went out to raise money 4 years ago, our seed round, we were rejected by 50 plus VCs in New York, in LA, and San Francisco for that exact reason. They just didn't think there was demand in the middle of the country. And they said, how are you going to compete with Whole Foods? And every single meeting was, we're not competing with Whole Foods. We're actually going
How is that? I'm curious about that, because that's, I think, to your point around those 50, why are you not competing with that?
So Whole Foods is the first leg of the national organic movement, and it's priced at a premium of 25 to 50%. It's only within driving distance of 50% of American families. And basically based on the income required to shop there and the geographies that they actually serve, they are serving a sliver of the country, which 10 years ago was the sliver that happened to be interested in natural and organic. And I think the bet that we made, and that our growth has actually proven right, is that demand has been latent in the rest of the country now for a little while. And where we saw that, to sort of your point, Matt, about Instagram, was on social. We ended up raising our first $8.5 million from health and wellness influencers. So we went to Instagram stars, to YouTube stars, to bloggers, and actually raised in $25,000 to $50,000 increments and brought 150 of these people on board, which then catalyzed more or less a movement that now has over 300 people on our cap table, all before we took a dime from institutional money. And the really fascinating thing has been to see when we launched how big that demand was. So today we have 500,000 members. We're doing hundreds of millions of dollars of sales a year. And 50% of those sales are from the Midwest and the Southeast, right? The traditional underconsumption markets.
Anyway, we could all get a free membership to that service?
Glad you asked. If you guys look under your seats, everyone should have a free 1-year membership for Thrive Market.
I was sparing you for Tap to do it. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And if you've got a sticker on the back of that, this is an extra kicker. We just launched organic, biodynamic, and sustainable wine. If you've got a little sticker on your card, I've got a bottle back there for you. They're curated by a master somm, absolutely amazing wines. But plug aside, the incredible thing is that that consumer is not your affluent millennial necessarily. We have as many people over the age of 50 as we do under the age of 30. Yeah. The average household income is $75,000. It's a middle-class, middle American mom. And I think that is the democratizing force of technology, that those tastes, those preferences, the lifestyle you want to live is no longer a function of the generation you're a part of or the geography that you live in.
Well, I think it's critically important. I mean, this was the thing that just stood out to me, is just the educational and health impacts that are either had or neglected by not actually having access to these healthier products.
That's right.
So Nicholas, as you think about growing your business, how much do you think about any challenges you may have within your supply chain? Because production agriculture is exactly that. It's primarily your synthetic GMO types of products and solutions, that there's long cycles to get people to function differently. Do you think about or see that as a challenge for you? And yes, there may be the demand for it, but can I reliably get the type of products that I need and the locations that I need to be able to deliver on my brand promise?
It's an excellent question. I think the technology is really going to help us dramatically with this. I think with blockchain, where we're going to have greater transparency, we're going to be able to track where we can source and where it's coming from. And I also think, like, in this whole movement of sort of natural food, it's related to demand. So if demand continues to accelerate and you have more velocity, like, there's going to be more investment into the supply chain. But I think for us, like, our menu's based on this philosophy of less is more, right? So if you have less ingredients because they're more natural, then you don't need to source as many inputs. And I think that's the beauty of Bluestone Lane. The majority of the menu is probably made with like only 10 ingredients. So
I think that's really a astute point. I was actually, and it's counter to what most people think. I was with CFO of Sweetgreen recently, and we were talking about when they don't have access to certain ingredients on their menu, is your customer disappointed? And they actually found it's the complete opposite of that, because it feels more authentic that, yes, we are actually living what we preach around sourcing those healthier products, and that it shouldn't always be available, right? Things are grown in the outdoors, and there's risks to that going forward. So Matthew, you are in venture, and you've worked with Related, and you've seen the spectrum of emerging companies, but also the really well-established incumbents in, granted, other industries. How do you see the growth of these types of businesses occurring over the next several years? Because food is very different than a software platform. It's harder to scale these businesses. How do you think about managing the growth expectations for investors in businesses that are tackling food-related problems?
Well, let's separate out fast casual from CPG.
Yep.
On the fast casual side, I think it's something Nick said, which I think was well articulated, that basically plant-based protein, plant-based diet eventually becomes the chassis, and protein is the condiment, right? And so any concept that can nail that and scale will be the bridge, right? So I'm a little more skeptical of sort of exclusively vegan concepts as being scalable at the moment. It's just still too limited, but there is an opening, because I don't want to necessarily go and eat salad and lettuce and alfalfa. Like, I want a more hearty lunch, right?
Yeah.
I want something I more associate, more filling. So I think there's an opportunity for someone to occupy that space of being the bridge and then scale it, and not going to happen overnight. But you first have to admit it to evidence and accept the fact that it's happening. Like, we can wait till the articles are written in 10 years from now in Fast Company that everyone moved in this direction, but it doesn't matter. It's already happening. So we're sort of scouring and looking at what is a fast casual concept that can scale, where the plant-based and healthy is the chassis, protein is the condiment. So that's number one. Only I think 2%. I'm telling all my staff's data, so I have to give them credit, Uday Ahuja and Nick Sisodia. But 2% of fast casuals are vegan-based, but that'll change. On the CPG side, once you accept the fact that the world is moving entirely in this direction, and it's not just millennial driven, they're just the bleeding edge, right? That all the best minds will start working on great CPG products. It's happening already in chickpeas and so forth, but that where the flavor profile is so compelling, it really doesn't matter what the underlying ingredients are. You just know it's sort of healthier. So we just did an investment, we haven't announced it yet, in a company called Outstanding Foods. And their premise is simple, that one of the big impediments for people from going vegan is they don't want to leave bacon behind. So they're like, let's attack bacon, right? So they've been working in their lab for a couple of years now to figure out the perfect construct of bacon that'll make you not feel bad about bacon. Second point is, we don't want to have to make people change their habits. People like to binge. They go into a bag of chips. They eat like crazy. Well, let's change the profile of what's in that bag so you can happily binge and you didn't even know you were eating mushrooms. So that's happening too. And eventually, when the best minds and the money starts chasing all those ideas, you're going to walk down the aisles of not just Whole Foods, but whatever, ShopRite, and that will be the only thing there. And so I'm not sure what the innovation cycle is. I presume it'll be the same. Kraft and Mondelez, all these guys will just be buying up and gobbling the Outstanding Foods of the world. I don't think that's necessarily going to change. I don't think they're going to be able to catch up and innovate themselves. But the most important thing to accept is this is where the whole world is going, and then you just follow the opportunities.
Yeah. And so, Nick, for the path for how you continue to build this business going forward, I'd just love to hear some kind of hard lessons learned along the way that you think now puts you and the company in a really opportune place at this moment to really take advantage of what you see going ahead in your...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the greatest challenge for us has been keeping the wheels on. To Matt's point, this is the demand drives it. we brought in 500,000 members in 4 years. The biggest challenge for us is that we aren't just a software business, so we're having to stand up fulfillment centers. We're having to build out supply chains. We started selling only third-party branded products. Today, 25% of our sales are being driven by our private label brand. We have over 500 SKUs that we've launched over the last 2.5 years across every category that we sell. And within about 80% of those categories, we're the top-selling brand now. So you talked about sourcing before, and Nick mentioned kind of how they're sourcing. We're now having to do that across multiple categories and hundreds of SKUs. So that's
how does that work then with the partners that want to sell on your platform? Because it creates this unique competitive dynamic within that.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been fascinating that I think the typical private label model is you come in with a product that is equal or slightly inferior to the third-party branded product, mark it down on price, take some additional margin, and call it a day. Our approach has been actually to try to up-level the quality, create a brand that's aspirational, focus on transparency of the supply chain and telling the story behind how we source the product, cutting out steps in the supply chain, simplifying the ingredient deck, and doing the things that our members are basically telling us they want, so that one, it ends up being the leading product in the category, but two, it actually draws attention to that category. And what we typically see is that the third-party brands in the categories where we launch our own brand end up getting a sales boost as well, because we're just drawing people to that trend, right? If it was mushroom jerky, which we haven't launched yet, by the way, but if we launched that private label, we'd see sales actually go up for the mushroom jerky brands on the site. So we've learned the hard way that building an operating business is challenging. Product sourcing is challenging and takes time. And what's exciting right now is we have the infrastructure to, I think, tap into the secular trend. And to Matt's point, this is the future, right? And you asked the question before, like, where does this go in 5 years? I think we're at the knee of the growth curve, right? You look at organic right now is 5% of the market, depending on if you look at CPG or fresh, but about 5% of the market, but it's growing at 4 times the rate of non-organic. Organic used to be the bleeding edge. Now it's not even organic, it's regenerative. Right? 5 years ago, vegan was considered sort of fringe, and it was an all or nothing binary decision. Now everybody wants to be more plant-based. So these attitudes are changing so fast, and that demand is driving innovation, like what we're doing, like what Bluestone is doing. And I think the proliferation of CPG brands and the proliferation of fast casual options are going to be out there very, very quickly. And for us, we just want to be there to catch all the people that are coming into this lifestyle.
Well, I think that's been what's been fascinating for me in moving into food and agriculture is just the inherent complexity that exists in these businesses, that it's not only digital, but it's physical infrastructure, it's perishable items that are not inherently as scalable. The complexity of these businesses are challenging, which I think points to some of the challenges you had in the beginning, is getting people to understand what these things were and how you could tap into that opportunity. But it feels very different at this moment in time, where the influx of capital seems to be accelerating, because there is a real belief that the incumbents are flat-footed and that you're at the leading edge of being able to extract the value of this shift. And so with that shift in mind, I think that, I'd love to end on this because we're just about on time. Matthew, around, a year from now, if we were kind of get back together on this stage, right now it's changing the way America eats. What does it look like 12 months? What do you think the topic of conversation, and anyone can jump in here, but I'd love to know kind of, the speed to your point, Nick, around the velocity of how things are changing. What do we think becomes the next big topic of next year that's kind of keeping you guys up at night or getting excited about what's coming down the path?
I think you're going to find big brands and everyone falling all over each other to demonstrate that they've embraced this trend. And you saw it with McDonald's. I think they lost in Sweden and Chicago, a vegan burger. I think within a year, everyone's falling all over each other at the big level to demonstrate that they're embracing this trend. I think everything we're saying right now is probably going to sound very quaint. Like it's going to be obvious. CPGs are all chasing these incredible plant-based, whether mushroom is the base and so forth. So I think you'll see another fast casual begin to emerge. I'm an investor in Bluestone, so I'll leave that out. But I think you're going to see another couple of fast casuals emerge to compete against Sweetgreens, and that we don't simply just want, salad-based and so forth. So a year is not a lot of time. What gets me about, give me 5 years to get really excited about? Yeah. I think, Al Gore comes out with The Inconvenient Truth, which moved the needle. But we all haven't had a tool to move the needle on an individual level, right? It's very hard for you to move your carbon footprint. It's not actionable. So this whole abstraction that the world may come to an end if we don't bring down the temperature, there really hasn't been anything to do. And now there's a growing awareness that there is something we can do, that we can move in this direction, that 20% of all man-made emissions are coming from agriculture. But if we make this simple change in our diet, that we can help save the planet. But even that's been too hard because I don't want to eat alfalfa, right? And now these are converging together. And within 5 years, I think it's going to feel good. Like, not only are we enjoying our lifestyle and we're eating better, our bodies are better, but we're also going ahead and do something about the planet. That excites me. Yeah. And that's why I think it's really important not to make people feel guilty about not being vegan or not whatever. Like, why not make them feel great, right? You're saving planet Earth. Your kids get to live longer for a bit, and your body is better for it. So I'm excited about that. But that's not a year. That's 5 years, I think.
And make the decisions easier. I think even in a year, every year it becomes easier, right? We do carbon neutral shipping. We're zero waste in our fulfillment centers. You shop on Thrive Market, you can buy the same products in some cases that you buy at Whole Foods, but you get a better price, which is easier. It's shipped to your door, which is easier. And you know that it's being done in a way that's ethical and sustainable. So I feel like there's more and more options, whether it's in the fast casual space or it's in e-commerce, where you don't have to choose. And the consumer, they want to have it all. And I think increasingly they can.
I love that as the philosophy.
We can have it all.
You don't have to choose.
Right.
Well, I think we're...
Jamie, I'm loving the leak, by the way. Is that global warming, or is that just a tent? I'm a shark. I don't sweat. I got my shark socks.
So I think we're out of time. So I just want to thank the three of you for joining the panel and for all of you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.